Well, I'm getting ready to cut operation 2 of bracket 1 here. And you'll notice I've got it set up so that I can put in bracket 1 here, and then the mirrored bracket just shifts over a little bit. Everything is referenced to G54 right here. I took that work offset and cut the jaws, and since I did that, then everything should be referenced okay. One thing I did do was originally when I cut the contour pass on the sidewalls, I did it at a 1/2 thousandths negative stock to leave, which meant that it would cut a 1/2 thousandths more. Wasn't quite enough. I couldn't get the bracket down in there, so I went back and told it 2 thousandths. Now the trick is since it wraps around right here, I can't just open the jaw up and drop it in. I actually have to get the jaw pretty close. And there we go. And I can see through the gap right here that that is all the way down, and I can look over there and see that that's down. I'll snug that up. I'll do the same for the other, and then I'm going to tighten them down with the torque wrench. Alright, the tool's in. I will walk it down. It should start over here somewhere. And I'm going to take the shear hog like I've done in a bunch of others, and I'm going to do a contour cut all the way around to get this off. Because when you try to come in with a face mill and do that, if this gets down to the wrong thickness, or you're going the wrong direction, it can catch and rip it up. And I've had some bad problems with that. But I found that if I just go through and do a contour pass with the shear hog, or that's my favorite one to use for this, but it takes all the way, takes away all the excess, and then I can just continue cutting with the shear hog. Saves me a tool change. These are the dual caliper brackets for the Ford 9-inch. It's a special project, not typically the kind of thing I would do, but or it's actually the kind of thing I would do. This goes to the Datsun 521 that I built the ball joint setup and the 13-inch brakes for. So this is so that he can use the same 13-inch rotor on the rear end. I need to tap these for the thread certs, the keen cert thread certs. I've got it in here. It doesn't have to, I'm not putting really any side load or anything like that on there. I just need it in here held tight enough that it doesn't twist. Okay. It's not really a whole lot of tapping force either because they're thin wall inserts and they require a bigger hole. So for the half 13, instead of a 27/64 tap drill, it required a 29/64. And I have had a bit of issues with these key inserts, which I'll show here in just a minute, but basically I'm going to power tap down in here. Since this is holding it, I can turn the switch on, I can run it down with the handle, turn the power off, and then hit reverse and let it walk itself back out. Piece of cake. As far as lining it up, basically I'm just coming down and I'm jogging the table with the hand cranks until it goes down into that hole nicely. It's within a few thou. There's other ways, yeah, technically I should indicate it in, blah, 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 but there's enough play and everything else, you know, the holes in the Willwood calipers and all that kind of stuff, that if I'm within 10 thou here, which I easily am, it will be close enough. And if not, if that bites me in the butt, then guess what? I get a cut up stock and make 2 more of these things at my expense. I'm not locking in the key inserts until I find out that everything fits okay. So. Now, one thing I have been trying to make a point of doing is knock off the chips here. That keeps me from any of them dragging up through as I reverse it, just to make sure that I don't damage the threads and stuff like that. So. Alright, now I got these from McMaster-Carr. I may have shown this, we'll see. Here's what they are. So they're not named key inserts, that's the style. Maybe they were called key inserts on McMaster-Carr, I don't know. Anyway, there's the part number, stuff like that. Now the difference is these are thin wall. I don't have another one handy to show you, but I know I've showed this in other videos and stuff like that, but and I may have already shot other footage of this, but see how the valley between the threads is flat? Okay, that's because they're trying to keep the wall thickness down. So instead of making the outer diameter bigger so that they can get a full valley there, they've done it this way. So that is why on this particular one, it's a half 13 thread for the peaks there, but you don't drill it with a 27/64 like you normally would. You drill it with a 29/64. That's supposed to allow the clearance for the minor diameter there with the way it is. Now what I've been finding is you see the thread peaks themselves. See how flat those are? I don't know if they're wide or what, but I've been having a really hard time with these things not wanting to go into the threads. On the previous bracket, I got 4 to fit. I've got 3 sitting there that I could not get to fit. So you can see how that first thread there that goes in, you know, trying to put it in there, it's dragging on the aluminum bad. So the ones that fit spin right in, no problem. But these, even with a wrench, don't want to go in. I've showed this before, but it's been quite a while, a couple of years at least. This is an 11mm, and that fits in there perfectly. Now, if there's just a light drag, this will work, and I can spin them in with this. If there's a bit more drag, I can go get the tool, and the tool fits in right against those tines, and that'll keep the tines from pinching in when I try to do the wrench. So what I'm looking for is 4 inserts. See, that one didn't want to go in. These look sharper, maybe. Maybe. Yeah, it's not taking much of a load there to get it to go in, so that's okay. And before I lock these in, one, I got to get all 8 of them. I got to get all 8 of them seated in properly. I need to go double check which side the caliper goes on, because they're a 1/2 inch. I want them just slightly countersunk, so if there's any of it that's going to protrude a little bit, like that's just a little bit proud of it, I want that on the side away from the caliper, obviously. So that I may end up having to pull all these out and put them in the other way. That part doesn't really matter which side the tines go in, which, you know, when they get punched down in. It just means that I would have to back it out a little bit and make sure that the bottom is flush. Okay, let's see if we can find 3 more. Those look fairly sharp. See, that's what I want. And then it's kind of like, okay, well, do I bother trying to return them to McMaster-Carr? They're not exactly cheap. But because they're not cheap, I don't exactly want to spend twice as much, you know, because I had to buy twice as many to get them to fit. All right, I went and verified, and the caliper mounts up against this side. So I spent a few minutes. You know, the ones that I could spin by hand were pretty easy. The ones that I had to use a wrench on, but I just put a straight edge here and made sure that it was down below this surface. I don't want it sticking up too much here, because that'll start limiting the tine engagement and stuff like that. But that's basically how I set them. You can see the tools here. This you know, and you could probably make something like this. I'm not exactly sure. They're probably swedged on there. Doesn't seem to be any threads in there. They all look the same. There's a 10mm. The other one I have back here is a 12mm. And basically you just put it down in the hole there so that it sits there like that. Should just have to tap it down. And I'm sure if you had a press, I have a press, I could go put them over in the press. Try that, I suppose, but so they're flush. You know, if I had a little bit more material thickness here, but I opted for a 1/2 inch. If I make these again, I may bring this surface up just a bit. Thing is it has to clear the back of the rotor, so that'll easily clear. But you know, if I were to add like an 1/8 inch of material there, it's a lot closer than that. So I just thought I'd give you a little peek at what it'll look like with the calipers mounted up. It'll sit on the differential like that. The 6-piston will actually be the one down in front. That's because the dropped spindles on the hard body, that's where it positions them. Something like that. Anyway, this is where he drew the bracket and where he wanted it, so that's where it's going. And then the backside. Granted, I didn't have matching hardware, so I just put what I had in there. I will bolt them up to the other ones. The bolts went right in. There was no issues with binding or anything like that. They just went right in, no problem. So I'll bolt them up to the other bracket real quick, just to verify, and then I think I'm ready to ship. I hope so. Alright, I figured I'd show some close-ups of the clearance here. Hopefully it'll show up with the shine of the... Oh, that's a little better. Had to put the rag there because the brightness off the aluminum, the reflection off the aluminum was too great for the camera. The 6-piston is basically the same. It goes out just a little further. Actually, the tabs that it mounts to go out a little further because it's just a hair shorter this way. I designed the clearance in on these ears when I did the 6-piston brackets for his front. So there shouldn't be any issues there.